freeing the Ivy Neck and Tulip Hill slaves. It doesn't get any more complicated than this. I originally didn't have the complicated thing on this when I wrote this, and then I thought, nobody will believe how complicated this is, except maybe our lawyer, who will have some remarks to make. Okay. All righty. What are we going to talk about now? Go ahead. Okay.
Calhoun. Sir, can you just tell me, can you explain how...
I can't. Who's talking?
Well, why don't you ask the question, we'll repeat it.
Oh, there's a person.
Can you just explain how big Tulip Hill was? Like when you're talking, we know the Creek Road. Was Muddy Creek Road, or how far north? Was it south? How big was Tulip Hill?
The house or the whole house?
Tulip Hill is...
I'm on Muddy Creek Road, so I'm just wondering if part of my farm was it. I'm north of Laura May Zane. So I'm in the old...
No, this is just before you get to the Cumberstone Road. There's two driveways sort of next to each other. One of them has big brick columns. That is the entrance to Tulip Hill. The one just to the left of it is the entrance to the farm fields on Tulip Hill, and a little...
Okay, thanks. Right around the...
Ivy Neck is at the very end of Cumberstone Road. You have to go all the way to the end of Cumberstone Road. You'll see a sign that says, "No trespassing. We don't shoot people today." Okay? You got it? You got it where it is?
How many acres is Tulip Hill?
Yeah, how many was it originally?
Do you really want to know? Over 3,000 acres.
Wow.
It came all the way past you know where those like stockade fence on the left-hand side, past Dixon's. I call it Dixon's. Tulip Hill went there. Guess what this was called here? This was Galloway's at one time. A lot of this land here belonged to the Galloway family. Tulip Hill was originally called Poplar Knoll, and then Samuel Galloway called it Tulip Hill. Ivy Neck was 587 acres and was actually owned by Samuel Galloway. He died in 1792. We have the first survey that was ever made of Ivy Neck. The 1792 survey is in the Maryland Hall of Records. The document is very fragile, and it's preserved up there. But I think if you go up there and you say, "I'm really interested in what Ivy Neck looks like," the lady there may show it to you. You have to be careful. We need to preserve these old historical documents. We sold Tulip Hill. My family, the people at Ivy Neck, owned Tulip Hill, and we sold it in 1911. And it's been through numerous hands since then. We're very happy with the people that live there now. They are wonderful. They really are. The house is in good hands. Okay, Manuelson, what is it? The topics? Anthony Morris, he's my cousin in Philadelphia. He wrote a book called The Abduction of Richard Neal. You're going to see Richard Neal in this later on as a slave who was freed, and how he was abducted by some lovely Marylanders that were trying to throw him in jail for freeing his slave wife. Where are we on this? On the maps here, you'll see where Ivy Neck and Tulip Hill are. And by the way, you'll see also there are two farms between Ivy Neck and Tulip Hill that were in the family at the time, caused lots of problems. The families, the Galloway and Cheston family, a labor-intensive tobacco, that nasty weed tobacco and hogsheads. James Cheston and Dr. Casper Morris. James Cheston Jr. was the one that died and wrote a will. The courts threw it out. Dr. Casper Morris straightened the whole mess out. Okay, why it doesn't get any more complicated than this? You will be astounded at what the courts made us do. Where did all the people go? And then some scenes from Ivy Neck. Next. Manuelson, the act of liberating a slave from bondage and giving him freedom. In a wider sense, releasing or delivering one person from the power or control of another. And here's some legalese right here. And to manumit is the same as to place beyond hand and power. So that's what, and you'll see some documents that actually did this. It became very complicated. You had to get a lawyer to do this sort of stuff. Couldn't go to the courthouse and file these things. You had to hire a lawyer to do the work for you. Next. Okay. This is my cousin from Philadelphia. We're in the same generations. We're both descended from Dr. Casper Morris. This is Dr. Casper Morris, a painting we have it. This is in our living room. And Anthony Morris wrote this wonderful book, The Abduction of Richard Neal. And do you have that in, Dorothy, is that in the library?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, okay, it's in the library for you to look at if you want to, or you can see where they can come from and buy a copy. Next. I added a couple things because Dr. Casper Morris really had fine taste. This is his ivory chess set that we have. We have a lot of things of Dr. Casper Morris, a lot of silver of his, plus his magnificent ivory chess set. I don't know whether it's legal to own this, but I'm not giving it up. Okay?
When is legal? When did he live? What were his,
You'll see that in a minute.
okay, all right,
1850.
thank you.
It's legal.
Okay, next one.
It is legal.
It's legal unless you sell it, I believe. Is that true?
It's legal
If
because
it
it
goes back
existed
far enough.
before the ban.
Yeah, it's an antique, right. So this is, okay. Where are we? Road River, West River, and Galesville. Next one. Okay, this is the map that's in the library. I don't have this map, but that peninsula right there between Road River and West River is Ivy Neck. Tulip Hill is right here, and Galesville is right there. There are two farms between Ivy Neck and Tulip Hill. Cedar Park is one that's still owned by the family, and Parkhurst, which has been sold out of the family. If you come down Coverstone Road, you'll see a big building with huge columns on the front. That's Cedar Park.
Is that where Byron Lee?
That's Parkhurst, I'm sorry, that's Parkhurst.
And is that where Byron Lee used to live?
Yes, that's where Mr. and Mrs. Lee, or Captain and Mrs. Lee live. Next one. Okay. I don't know who drew this, but this is part of Ivy Neck. And right in this area, see this thing right here? It was sort of an area that they kept the slaves on Ivy Neck. Right there. Our house is up here. The Ivy Neck house is right there. That's Corn Island, Big Island, and High Island. Road River over here. That Canning House Bay right here. West River on this side. This is Cheston Creek right here that comes up into the farm.
Why is it called Watkins Neck up at the top?
Because Samuel Galloway bought it from the Watkins family. And the Watkins had a house out here that's long been washed into the river. And the last thing that you ever saw out there until a couple of years ago, there was a big brick well out there, but it's washed away now. So. Next one. Okay. There's a picture of Tulip Hill that I took. And that's the Ivy Neck house. You probably should put your button here. Okay. This is built in 1757. This was built in 1787. Samuel Galloway's daughter married James Cheston. Her name was Anne Galloway. And they built Ivy Neck. Next. The families, the Galloway and Cheston and Morris families. Next one. Okay. It's really not that complicated. It just looks complicated. I got it figured out, though. Okay. Okay, this man, Richard Galloway, go back in history a little bit. I have another talk that I gave called The Battle of the Severn. That was the first battle on the North American continent among white people. The Puritans took on the Roman Catholic army that came up from St. Mary's County. The battle was fought up there in Annapolis on March the 25th, 1656. Puritans do not recognize Maryland Day as March the 25th. 1634, we recognize Maryland Day. My sister's looking at me. We recognize Maryland Day as March the 25th, 1656, when we defeated the Puritan, when the Puritans defeated the Calvert army at the Battle of the Severn. Okay? We were expelled from Virginia by Governor Berkeley. He told the Puritans to get out of Virginia or we were going to kill you. The Puritans made a deal with the Calvert to give them Anne Arundel, what became Anne Arundel County, and about 2,000 Puritans, their families, their slaves, and friends and people were close to the Puritans, came and settled across from the Naval Academy in what is now called Providence. And several books have been written on Providence. He arrived on December the 3rd, 1649 on a ship named the Adventure. And I think there were about 45 Puritans, all men on that ship. The women didn't come yet, but they had to establish some buildings and things. The first winters were pretty harsh. This is generation number 1 in Maryland. You follow this down through here, go down through here, over here like this, cross like this, and that is me right here. I am John Murray. This is Sarah Catherine Rigg, Roberta, and my mother right here. Married Charles Calhoun. That's me right here. I married Betty. We have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. So there is a 14th generation. I know this sounds kind of bizarre in this day and age of everybody moving all over the place, but we have stayed here all these years and we do not intend to go anywhere. There's Ivy Neck, Tulip Hill, Cedar Park, and that's Sudley over here. Those are the 4 family homes and the 4 very different lines. Either this line right here, the Bridgman family that lives at Cedar Park. Any questions on this?
Why does it say the influence on Quaker homes? Is that the style of the Quaker homes? Or
I'm sorry?
it says Galloway influence in West River's Quaker homes. So what does that mean? Oh, the actual physical homes? Like the architectural style?
I'm not sure I can answer that correctly because for a long time, this bunch up at the top, we were Puritans.
Yeah.
After the Battle of the Severn, almost all the Puritans became Quakers.
That was what I was
Okay? And in one of the talks I give, I am convinced that the reason that we became Quakers is because after the Battle of the Severn, a trial was held by my family of the captured officers of the Calvert Army and Governor Stone. They captured Governor Stone and they had 3 of the officers. The trial sentenced Governor Stone and the 3 officers to be killed by a firing squad. The women begged that Stone not be killed. Now, why didn't they beg that the officers not be killed? They didn't, but we happen to know that Stone was not, he was also injured in the battle. He brought the Calvert Army up here from St. Mary's. This battle took place. The first person killed in the battle was my 10th great-grandfather, a man named William Ayers. They tied the 3 officers to a tree and executed them. I believe that the Puritans were so struck down, particularly the women, of the terrible loss of life. They killed 34 Calverts on the battlefield. Only 3 Puritans were killed in this battle. They dragged the bodies to the shore, put them on little boats, took them out in the bay, went up in the Magathie River somewhere, dug a common grave, threw all the Calvert bodies into it. That grave has never been found. It's one of the great mysteries of Maryland. Where are the bodies? The Puritans certainly weren't going to tell anybody where they buried them. They took them up there and got rid of them. The level of hatred between the Puritans and the Calverts were just, and the Roman Catholics were just incredible in that time period in Maryland. The women, I believe, were so conscience-struck by what happened. Within 10 years, every one of those Puritans became a Quaker. It's just unbelievable what happened here in this county. We all became Quakers. And then we became Episcopalians. Or Methodists, some of us Methodists. It's a nice Methodist building we're here. Thank you very much. Okay. Any more questions on this? So there was a very strong Quaker influence. Now you're going to see this Quaker influence in the freeing of those slaves 20 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. Yes, ma'am.
Why did you switch from Quaker to Episcopalian to Methodist?
Good question.
Oh. Privateering during the War of 1812 and the Revolutionary War and slave trades. People, the Quakers came here and they started influencing the people that were here. And they thought, we're still slave traders and privateers and this kind of stuff. Gee, maybe we ought to clean our act and become real Quakers. That's probably what happened. But then, because of the slave trading and the other activities, they were read out of the Quaker meeting, and an awful lot of them became Episcopalians with St. James Church and Christ Church and St. Anne's in Annapolis and All Hallows. That's when those Anglican churches took faith.
So the people that still wanted to have slaves couldn't remain as Quakers?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think they could get away with it, though, really. They would get read out of the Quaker meeting. They did that all over the place in Maryland. Yeah. Okay. This is extracted from that document and made readable. Samuel Galloway's Anne Galloway, Mary James Cheston. They were the builders of Ivy Neck. They had 3 children. James married Mary Hollingsworth in Philadelphia. And they had these children. And Dr. Cass Morris in Philadelphia. Okay. We need to talk a little bit. I particularly showed those pictures of the tobacco harvesting because you really needed to understand what the economy was. And I'll give you a little story here. Roberta and my grandfather was the rector of St. Thomas's Church in Croom. Anybody here know where Croom is in Lower Marlborough? Okay, grandfather was the rector of that church. In 1923, his salary was 600 pounds of tobacco and $600. He was paid with tobacco because tobacco, even in the 1900s in southern Maryland, was still money.
Now, the account book of St. Thomas Parish was just given to the archives for conservation.
I'm sorry?
The account book that was kept for St. Thomas Parish just came into the archives last week or the week before.
Well, I have the book on St. Thomas. They just wrote a book on the...
Well,
Yeah.
this is the original account book that's been eaten by, some of it's been eaten by...
Well, all the Ivy Neck account books and Samuel Galloway's account books have been given to the archives.
Well, this is a different account book.
I know.
It came from somebody at
Yeah.
Chester.
Which family?
I can't remember. I just forgot
Yeah.
the name.
It's great to have that stuff preserved, though, really. Okay, next. Okay, my great-great-uncle, my grandfather's brother, Forbes Calhoun, painted these incredible tiles, about so big, and Betty had them mounted in a big frame in our hallway. And here's one that he did, the end of Rolling Road, and look what they're hauling, a hogshead of tobacco. Because the interesting thing about those, they could lay them on their side and roll them down the road with oxen. So that's what and you see the workers here, taking it to the water to load it on a ship to go to Europe.
Where is that rolling road?
Could be up Ellicott City here, Elkridge.
Yeah, there's still a rolling road.
Oh, yeah.
But at that time, the Elkridge on the Patapsco River was a very active port. It's so silted in now, you could barely get up there with a dinghy. But Roberta's, and you grew up in Elkridge.
There's a rolling road right off 214, just west of,
Louder so people hear.
just west of Edgewater, there's a rolling road right off 214.
Well, they rolled,
Going north.
probably from rolling hogsheads down that one. But that's how they got them. You know, in colonial times, they couldn't get these, didn't have wagons big enough to put 1,000 pounds of tobacco up on it, so they just put a stick or a pipe through the center of it, put some boards or logs on the outside, hooked them up to some, and took them down the road. Next one. This is another one of Forbes's painting right here of tobacco. Tobacco was money. There they are, working tobacco. And there was a lot of wheat that was grown in this area in colonial times. Revolutionary War records show the amount of wheat that came out of Maryland to feed the army. Excellent. Okay. This is one of the biggest tobacco barns I have ever seen around here. You go across Owensville Road to Route 2 and a farm on the left-hand side up on that hill. This is where this tobacco barn was. Alan and I heard about a horizontal tobacco press in that thing. I had never seen a horizontal tobacco press in my life. I thought they all pressed vertically. Wait till you see this thing. It was enormous. So there we are. We went into the barn, and here is this monstrous press. So they had to lay, I don't know how they did it, okay? Because they had to lay the hogshead horizontally and somehow or other stuff tobacco into the thing and run this huge screw jack down here with that round thing just inside the barrel, pushing on the tobacco to make it so compressed. By the way, when this stuff was compressed, you really couldn't pull it apart. I mean, it was like rock, or not rock, but yeah, incredible the amount of pressure that was there. I've never seen. Look at the size. That screw jack probably was that big around. Excellent.
Where is that press now? Where is the press now?
They bulldozed the thing down. The lady that owned the land was going to give it to us. We went over there to get it, and they're building a house on the site of there's a house now where this barn was. On the Cheston farm. So that's what, see, I didn't think you would know what this was, so that's what, okay, next one. Go back a couple, will you? Another one? No, I guess not. Okay. I thought I had a picture of Alan in this thing. All right, I'm sorry. Okay, this is the Emma Giles at the Ivy Neck Wharf. It's right here. I often look at this thing and say, I wonder if that's my grandfather standing there. But that's his bike. He would have. I'd like to think he would have ridden that bike down to the pier and gone out on the pier. Now, this is really interesting. Notice these waves right here? She's backing out. There is no way in the world that a big ship like that, and she's 340 feet long, that she could turn around in Road River. So she came in head first into the pier at a little bit of an angle, because the pier was built at an angle, so she could come right in there. She would load from the port side, and there she is in reverse backing out. Because see the waves going that way? You can see them way over there. She's backing out of there. Interesting picture. That's the pilot house, okay? What year do you think this picture was taken? This was taken before 1898, because in 1898 they added a sleeping thing right here. That's a huge brass eagle up on top of her cabin that was replaced by a spotlight. So this is how we date these pictures of the Emma Giles. Before 1898 at Ivy Neck. Came every Wednesday to Ivy Neck. Hogsheads of tobacco were loaded from not only Ivy Neck but other farmers, and and cattle were taken out on the pier and put on here and sent up to Baltimore. I have a wonderful, one of my presentations, by the way, is the Emma Giles, and I teach you how a big steam engine on this thing works. So, go ahead. Okay, James Cheston Jr. and Dr. Casper Morris. Okay. Okay. James Cheston was born December the 30th, 1799 at Tulip Hill. He is the son of James Cheston Sr. and Anne Galloway. They were the builders of Tulip Hill. Ivy Neck owned Tulip Hill. Anne was the daughter of Samuel Galloway, the builder of Tulip Hill. She had a sister, by the way, Sarah, who married a guy over in Chestertown. He has attended St. John's College, where he was Francis Scott Key's roommate and his lifelong friend. As a young man, James moved to Baltimore to attend to his father's business interests. The money was in Baltimore and not in Annapolis. That's why the British went up there to try to burn the place down, because it was a hotbed of pirates, and that's where the money was. It was in Baltimore, and they were determined to burn it down. In 1804, James married Mary Hollingsworth from Philadelphia. James was a member of Maryland 51st Regiment and a lieutenant colonel in 1814 at the Battle of North Point. I don't know how many of you ever realized that, to me, the real battle took place out on North Point, where they bushwhacked the British general, shot him out of a tree, a sniper in a tree shot with General Ross. They packed him in a whiskey barrel and took him to Fairfax, Nova Scotia, where they buried him. Good riddance. Okay. James was slightly wounded at the Battle of North Point. I had another fifth great grandfather, Hollingsworth, Levi Hollingsworth, who was also, he fought at the Battle of North Point, and he was wounded also. The British, it was a delaying action across North Point. They were going to go around, they got stymied at Fort McHenry, so they'll go ashore at North Point, sweep around like this, take the city and burn it. They kept running into all of these crazy American Army guys, Navy guys, anybody they could put together, militia out of Pennsylvania. By the time they got to Hampstead Hill to rest for the night, there were 20,000 militiamen and army people to stop the British. They took one look at it. Our general had been shot. We don't know what to do. They got on the boat and left. That's what happened. He was wounded and fought at that battle. He died on May the 31st, 1843 in Baltimore. At the time of his death, he owned 77 slaves. The slaves at Ivy Neck and the slaves at Tulip Hill. Thanks. Any questions on that? Because now we're going to get into the real meat of the problem. Okay. On his deathbed, James Cheston Jr. dictated to his son-in-law, Dr. Casper Morris, who's probably his doctor also, a will leaving all his slaves to his son Galloway Cheston. Galloway Cheston was one of three sons and two daughters. Galloway Cheston, in order that Galloway might carry out the intentions of setting all of his slaves free, the court set aside this verbal will and directed that his estate be divided among the 6 heirs. Okay. They were James Cheston, I had the number wrong, there's 6, not 5. Right. They were James Cheston III, Galloway Cheston, Samuel Cheston, Fanny H. Cheston, Daniel Murray, and his daughter Anne Cheston Morris. I'm descended, by the way, from Anne Cheston Morris, the wife of Dr. Casper Morris.
Why didn't he just free them in his will?
Probably didn't have a will, because if he tried to write a will on his deathbed, or dictate a will to his son-in-law on his deathbed, if he'd had a will, then it would have gone back to that written will, and apparently there wasn't a written will to go back to. That's a good question, because that's never come up before. I just figured all along he didn't have a will, and he tried to do a verbal will. Okay. Dr. Casper Morris, born in 1805 and he died in 1884, was the son of Israel Morris and Mary Hollingsworth of Philadelphia. I think these Hollingsworth people are sneaking into this thing, all this family from all over the place, but they're all up in Philadelphia. They're merchants, they had breweries, they were beer masters, they had distilleries, this kind of stuff. Okay. He was a prominent Philadelphia physician who had received his medical doctorate from the University of Pennsylvania in 1826 at the age of 21. Guy was something else, he really was. Casper married Ann Cheston, who was 1810 to 1880 of Ivy Neck in 1829. They had 3 sons and 1 daughter, Mary Hollingsworth Morris, who inherited Ivy Neck. Casper maintained his residence in Philadelphia while traveling back and forth to Ivy Neck. He was also a business partner of the Quaker businessman Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins was not a doctor. He was a Quaker investor, okay? Dr. Casper Morris designed the hospital. I have his book on the design of the hospital. He was a very prominent doctor, knew all about what a hospital should look like in the 1800s. He did not fight in the American Civil War, had nothing to do with the Civil War because of his Quaker leanings. And he was, as I said, instrumental in the design of the hospital. Casper died in March the 17th. Oh, I'm sorry. Why is that going off? Because you're leaning on it. Casper died March the 17th, 1884, as resident in Philadelphia. During his life, Casper maintained a very strong Quaker belief. Next. It doesn't get any more complicated than this. Okay. The problem. The will was thrown out by the courts. The executors have been directed by the court to distribute the 77 slaves to 6 people. Well, this is a real problem. Mom goes here, the kid goes there, the dad goes over here. I can't imagine such a thing. You're going to see how they solved the problem. Okay. Let's first look at the list of the 77 slaves. There they are. James Cheston Jr., 77 slaves to be freed following his death in 1843 by his family at his request. The ages of the children, or the ages of the slaves, was 6 months to 78 years of age. The court appoint 2 executors for the estate, J. Thomas and Alfred Selman. Now, Selman is from the other side of Road River, over where the Smithsonian is now. Okay? This alphabetic list was composed by Anthony Morris, my cousin in Philadelphia, from Family Records. Richard Neal. And there's always, if you look at the list of people, by the way, a lot of them didn't have last names. But they had to have last names assigned to them when they went to record them in manumission before you. Okay. All right, next one. So we've got these 77 people. The executives have to distribute the 77 slaves not by number of people, but equitable by dollar value to the 6 heirs. Oh boy. The per person values go from $1 from a very old person who can't really work anymore to $400 for a black man that can work in the tobacco fields. Okay? A person capable of doing hard physical labor. It appears that they must have gone through the entire list and assigned a dollar value to each person based on that person's value and arrived at the gross value of $14,623 for the 77 slaves. You see what I mean about how to get any more complicated than this, really? Okay, now look what happens. Okay, The whole thing was quite a shock to me, as this was the first time I had ever seen a dollar value assigned to a human being. $14,623 divided by 6, the 6 heirs, directed by the court, comes out to $2,437.60 extended. Okay. And there they are right there. Can everybody read that? Pretty much?
Dollar values were assigned to slaves all the time.
I'm sorry?
Dollar values were always assigned all the time.
Well, what?
Dollar values were assigned to slaves all the time.
Yeah, but I didn't do it, and I haven't seen them.
Okay.
Why would I see them?
I don't know.
No,
I'm not in the slave business.
never know.
So they got the value at a public auction.
Well, I don't go to slave public auctions either. Okay, so these numbers actually came out pretty close, didn't they?
What year was that?
1843. Okay, next. There they are. Okay, here's an interesting one. Kitty Neal, 23 years old. What's it say right here? William of Kitty Neal, age 2. That is her son in lot 4, and she's in lot 1. And this is all over the place in this thing. Families broken up by this. It didn't happen. Hear me? It didn't happen. They had to do this because they were directed by the courts to do it. The amount of dollar value on these things are really kind of arbitrary when you think about it, because these people had no intention of doing that. They had a very strong Quaker influence their whole lives. They weren't going to do it. My family would not do this. But they had to. Next.
I mean, what you're saying, that this was just sort of, they did the paperwork, but that this really didn't happen.
I think the country expression is a snare and a delusion.
Yeah.
Right?
It was a fraud on whoever they were,
Yeah.
they were trying to trick, I guess, the government or whoever was forcing them to do this.
Okay. Dr. Casper Morris and Ann Morris, deed of manumission for Fanny Davis, Ellen Wilson, Sam Davis, and William Neal of Kitty. And then for that date, and then they worked their way through these 77 like this. And then they had to go also, about half of them didn't have last names, so they had to sign some kind of, come up with last names for people as well in order to go to a lawyer and fill out the paperwork and have it filed with the state of Maryland. That's what the documents look like. Next. The 1860 census of Cumberstone, because these people were now free, if you go over to this thing, and actually the next page shows it a little bit better, Henry M. Murray, my great-great-great-grandfather, is up there, Mary Murray, Cornelia, and then here's the farm workers right here. The farm workers are all those people that were freed, except they were now employees of Ivy Neck Farm and Tulip Hill. I don't know what they were paid. All those records are now in the Hall of Records. Now here's the problem. One of the problems that this created in the neighborhood. On Ivy Neck, there were 3 whites, the Henry Murray family, and there were 27 free blacks in 6 families, 0 slaves. The next farm over, Parkhurst, had 5 slaves that were not freed yet because Maryland didn't free their slaves. And Cedar Park, the next one to get to Tulip Hill, there were 32 slaves. The slaves on Tulip Hill and Ivy Neck had to move back and forth and say, "Hi guys, how you doing?" "No, we're free people." "Oh, we're slaves." Okay, can you imagine what went on in this neighborhood with this going on? All in that same family. Everybody here in the Cumberstone is related to everybody else. Next one. Okay, here's the Henry Wilson family. Henry Wilson, when you come in the Galesville Road, that house is Henry Wilson's house. Henry Wilson got his land from the Tulip Hill people. The numbers are family members assigned by the census of 1860. Henry Wilson was in Group 2, remember that thing? And was assigned to Galloway Cheston. He was a free black living and working at Ivy Neck as a farmhand in 1860. There's Henry Wilson, the farmhand. Note, my cousin wrote this. In 1871, Henry Wilson bought 25 acres on the north side of Main Street in Galesville and built a 2.5-story house, now abandoned, next to the ball field. Here's his wife, Kitty, and their children.
Is that the house that there was a picture of in the Capitol yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's Wilson in the picture too. And a Gertrude Magel.
Yeah.
Wow.
Spelled the lady's name wrong. Anyway, so there's a man that was freed, now owned a little farmstead on the Galesville Road, probably grew tobacco there for years and years and years, had a big family, more and more people. I think at one time when the county bought it, there were 120 heirs for that property that the county had to settle with. Next one. Some slavery dates. 1863, 1864, 1663, 64, depending on whether you had the new or the old calendar, was Maryland legalized slavery. During this almost 200-year period, a number of absolutely horrible pieces of legislation were made into laws. 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation only for the states that were in rebellion, not Maryland. Maryland was not a state in rebellion. November the 1st, 1864, slavery is abolished in Maryland. Next. Where did all the people go? Well, the original Chews Chapel Church was on Chews Chapel Road off of the old county road on the way to Owensville. And I showed you earlier that the marking of the entrance to the cemetery, and it's here again. This is a very old African American cemetery located there. There it is. Okay. On the portion of Ivy Neck, how many people been up Cheston Creek? Anybody? The creek, okay. You get to the head of Cheston Creek on the left-hand side, it's the woods. The portion of Ivy Neck on the west side of Cheston Creek, now owned by the Smithsonian Institution, there is a very large African American cemetery in a very grown-up woods. Only several of the graves are marked. They're hard to find. It is my understanding from the family that slaves were buried here for hundreds of years. The number is unknown. And you can just sort of extrapolate this. I'm not a mathematician, but a mathematician can say, well, wait a minute. In 1863, you had 77 slaves. You probably had about the same number of slaves, and plus the two other family farms that are there, so probably around 100 slaves. And 20% of them died every year. So every 100 years, 200 people would have died or more because they didn't have any medical care. They lived a pretty primitive life. There were no doctors or anything to take care of them. So we've been there for 312 years. You could be hundreds and hundreds of people buried in that cemetery. I was taken there as a child by a black man that was on the farm. His name was George Downs. George took me over there. A number of times I went over, he would take me over, and the only thing marking the graves were little pieces of wood that were driven in the ground. You'll see one of the few tombstones, a stone tombstone that's there. I think there probably couldn't be more than about 4. Hundreds of people are buried there, and no one knows who they are. Next. There's a man named James Byron. He's on the list of slaves, by the way. I don't remember which one of those groups he's in. But apparently his family had enough money to buy a stone to put on his grave, and he has a footstone. See that? There's that thing. Right there's a little footstone. There's this, and the woods are all grown up. Kind of sad, isn't it? No, George used to take me over there, and he would, Mr. John, a lot of people buried here. Next. Seen some ivy neck. This picture was taken in 1888. This is the servants at the Ivy Neck house. I would absolutely guarantee you that certainly that man had been a slave. His name is Daniel Boston. He was our cook. These ladies worked in the house. These men worked around the house probably, or with the carriages and the horses and things like that. Next one. There they all are in the Ivy Neck kitchen. There's that gentleman right there. These are the people that work on the farm. They come in the kitchen to get fed. 1888, next. You saw this before, the little kids taking up ground leaves. Next. This is a picture, this is the stable at Ivy Neck. Underneath of this thing is a huge ice house, about 30 feet across and about 30 feet deep. They cut ice on the river. The men cut ice on the river, dragged it up with horses and oxen, and the idea was to make ice cream on the 4th of July. And they did it. They packed so much in there, and they packed it in hay and straw. Next. We didn't get, Ivy Neck didn't get electricity until 1947. They had a Delco system there and a bunch of batteries, huge array of batteries in the basement to provide electricity. There was a big, this is the smokehouse right here, that little connector between the main house and this thing. This is a smokehouse. They're getting hams out. Next one. There's the German Shepherd. His name was Cam. He was guarding the hams. The hams were rubbed with wood ashes, saltpeter, a lot of maple, or not maple, but molasses and salt, wrapped in that brown paper, wrapped in muslin. They were sewed in these muslin sacks, and the muslin sacks were hung out here and whitewashed. You didn't have refrigeration. You didn't need it. And the purpose of the whitewash to keep the bugs out of the hams. And they were sealed and whitewashed. Right there.
Whitewash is lime and water.
Yeah.
Lime, salt,
Yeah.
and water.
Oh, a little ditty about country hams. I cooked it once for General Lee. He says this am a treat. I wouldn't mind the bullets. Angels cured such meat. Next one. Okay, here's pictures of, oh, by the way, very clever people. While they were cutting ice and they would oyster. There's a huge pile of oysters sitting up on there. There's a little Model T that they drag things up. And this guy right here, he's falling in and somebody's grabbing him. He's holding on to his oyster tongs. He was hand-tonguing. So as they cut the ice, drag the ice out, send it up to the ice house, it would move back a little bit, and oyster a little bit more, and then oyster a little bit more. And he is actually, that guy is ready to go for a bath in the river. Right there. See him grab right there? You can see his arm grabbing him right there. He's going in. Okay, next.
When were those pictures taken? When were
Probably I would think in the 20s. Okay, so the men on the farm, they also hauled, saying there were huge runs of herring in Rogue River, and they would salt herring in hogsheads and ship them to Baltimore on the Amber Giles and sell them in Baltimore. Can't do that anymore. Okay. Muddy Creek Road and the Galesville Road. And they're men going to the blacksmith shop in Galesville. Excellent. Picture of Ivy Neck. It's a two-family house. Cattle and sheep. A lot of sheep on the farm when I was a kid. Next one. Oh, Muddy Creek Road again. I think you've seen that one before. Okay. You leave that up. Take that in the back, yeah. I get pretty emotional about stuff, those of you who've known me. Over the years, I have authored a number of historical presentations. This one is number 5. And without a doubt, the most difficult one I have ever done. How in the world do you talk about a subject so absolutely horrible that it pains one to do it? I have a habit of becoming totally emotionally engrossed in the subject. I guess that I'm a very different person to deal with when all of this, and I'm writing on the subject at hand. Don't call me, don't talk to me, oh boy. In freeing the slaves at this horrible period in American history leading up to the Civil War, my ancestors and their very close relatives, with their strong and unfailing Quaker background, rose above everything and did the right thing. I am so incredibly proud of these people. My problem is, how do I end this? This again was not easy. Do I thank you for putting up with me? Is there something I can put in front of you that finalizes what we did here today? Yes, there is.
Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thanks, John. That was so cool. I wish Bill had been here.
That was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you all leave, when this is over, if you haven't already, we have a little sign-in book in the back, and Maryland Historical Society or whoever it is that we'd have to deal with likes to see all the signatures, all the people that come to the event, so just so we can, it helps for our grants and stuff like that. So there's also a thing back there for donations. And, we have today, it's fascinating talk, and but I only heard most of it once, but from Mr. John Calhoun, whose family's been here since 1649. So that much time, you can remember a lot of stuff that ought to have happened. And, but it's a great presentation. I'm sure you all enjoy it, so. Mr. John Calhoun.
Actually, it's Calhoun, but we'll let him off on this.
Hey, I'm from Southern Maryland, I'm talking.
That's right. Yeah, the Calhouns are lazy Calhouns, that's what it is. My name is John Murray Calhoun, and if you catch the middle name, there's a lot of Murrays around here. So I'm descended from the Galloways and the Murrays and the Chestons and a whole bunch of other people. And most of the Puritans. Yes? Can you hear me back there louder? Louder. Thank you, Dorothy. Okay, well, Dorothy reminds me of the title of this little start here. This is not why you're here, by the way. I had a little private showing over at the farm. I asked Dorothy if she'd like to come over and see what they were going to see here. And so we went through the story of the slaves and the freeing of the slaves. And I said, well, is this okay? And she said, oh, this is just wonderful. We want more pictures. Okay? So I have been busy putting together more pictures, and then once we go through this, I just want you to have a feel of the life that we lived here and my ancestors lived in the, pretty much, a lot of this is from the 1800s and the early 1900s. So this was more pictures or else, okay? And by the way, this is my sister Roberta, who is going to operate the computer. Got it. Oh, click on blank screen. There you go.
It's testing, one, two.
No, left button. Okay. One of the things that we're going to talk about in the freeing of the Ivy Neck and Tulip Hill slaves is the black population of this area. And
Louder.
louder? Oh my gracious! Can I do it louder?
Does that work?
No, it's off of the recording thing. I was doing some research on the freeing of slaves in the United States and Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, and in the book that I was looking at, there was an incredible, a copy of a painting of a slave burial, and that's what this is, and I managed to get lifted from this book, and I think it's a pretty remarkable thing because it's the only thing anywhere like it that I have ever seen. Of course, there were no photographs during that time, so this is an artist's reception or conception of what the burial of the slaves would look like. And you can see they're burying in a wooden coffin in the woods somewhere, probably away. There's no white people in this thing, and I'm sure that they conducted their burials in great secrecy. Next. Betty and I own Ivy Neck Farm, which is the farm at the end of Cumberstone Road. And here's an aerial photograph that I took in 1963 of Ivy Neck. Our house is up here. This is the Road River coming up here. That's the big island in Road River. This is some of the farm buildings, and we raise Black Angus cattle on this farm. Next. Okay, this is the earliest known photograph of Tulip Hill. You notice there's no landscaping in front of it like there is now. It's in a bunch of terraces now. It's not like that at all in this picture. This is a very, very old Tulip Hill picture. My family owned Tulip Hill until 1911 when we sold it. It was built in 1757 by Samuel Galloway and his wife, but his wife did not live long enough to move into the house with her husband. Samuel Galloway was my 5th great-grandfather. Next. Now, the pictures you're going to see here, there's no particular order to them. I just got them out of old albums, and I've downloaded them, and I created a PowerPoint presentation so you can see some old photographs. This is the oyster fleet in Road River, and there's an enormous boat right there. I imagine it's something like a big punji or something like that, and the little oyster boats selling their oysters to this guy. They'll probably end up in Baltimore. Next. Okay. My great-great aunt, Miss Ann Cheston Murray, was born in the last year of the Civil War, and she lived to be 96. And during her lifetime, she took a lot of pictures in the neighborhood, a lot of pictures of the black members of the community, and that's her handwriting right there. This was probably taken in about maybe 1880, 1870, something like that, and it's a watermelon party. Next. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me and say, well, tell me more about this or something, if I know more about it. Okay.
I have a question.
What's
Your family's home at Tulip Hill, how far is that from Camp Letts?
a long... No, yeah, that... Camp Letts is on the Mayo Road. You have to go out Cumberstone, Muddy Creek, all the way up to 214, and then out 214.
But isn't it on the Road River?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's on the other far side of the river.
Yeah, and actually, you'll see an aerial you'll see an aerial photograph of Camp Letts a little bit, taken in 1937 by an open biplane. Okay, this is the antique gateway belonging to the Daniel Starr United Beneficiary Association Cemetery, Colored, of Anne Arundel County, Maryland. This is the Chews Chapel original cemetery, which is over on the Lansdale property. No one knows where it is now. I think I know where it is. Maybe Eric or somebody could probably pin it down to exactly where it is. But it doesn't really exist anymore because the original Chews Chapel burned. And then they built the new Chews Chapel out on the Owensville Road, and there's a cemetery there. But this is the original black cemetery right here. Very old photograph of that black cemetery with this gateway thing right here. It's lost to history.
What is the year of that photograph, John?
Probably about 1880, I would think. That's when she did.
When did it burn?
Don't know. The question was, when did the church burn? I don't know when it burned. Go ahead. Next one. Okay. This is an interesting picture because you're living now in an area that one time was an enormous tobacco operation by everybody. Tobacco was money. Tobacco was how we lived, how we built our houses, how we maintained this way of life that we had. And after the tobacco was harvested, it was cut off, and you're going to see some pictures in a little while, the type of operation that we had to go through to get the tobacco up. When you cut the tobacco off, the tobacco plant continued to live from the stem that was sticking up out of the ground and produce these things called ground leaves. And the little black children were allowed to go out in the fields, and you'll see all of these ground leaves here. They got a little cart right here, and they actually collected the ground leaves. They were given them, they probably gave them to their parents, who then turned around and sold them.
That's how my mom got our first washing machine. Selling ground leaves.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
That's the wash tub.
There they are.
Ground leaves differ from regular tobacco leaves.
You'll see.
Okay.
Regular tobacco leaves are huge, okay?
But
You
the
will see
ground-
some great big ones at Ivy Neck.
Okay, did the ground leaves though produce tobacco that could be smoked?
Sure.
or-
Chewed, if you want to. I wouldn't do it, but, okay. But anyway, that's what these little kids did. They went out into the tobacco fields and harvested the ground leaves and turned them into their parents, I'm sure, who turned around and sold them. Next. Okay, this is a very early photograph of the interior of Tulip Hill with the stairs to the second floor. Okay, probably again about 1880, 1890. That is Samuel Galloway's weather instrument. Betty and I own that. And this beautiful hanging lamp right here, that was a whale oil lamp that pulled down on chains where they would light it and then push it back up. Oh, that's the light in our hall at home. This is very old Tulip Hill.
John, family legend has it, and it's been disputed sometimes, John's ancestor as a boy rode a horse up the steps.
Okay. This is very embarrassing, okay? I believe that it is true. Samuel Galloway's son, John Galloway, was at a party in Annapolis. He got smashed, rode his horse home, came in the front door, and I've heard it from so many people and so many of my ancestors, he literally rode a horse to the second floor. I looked as a kid for the steps, on the steps to see if I could find a horse footprint. I never could find any. But maybe the steps had carpeting on them. Okay. With that,
A long time ago, the stairs were built.
that's right.
Each step was not too steep because his wife was in the family way, and he wanted the staircase to be as easy for her to rise up as possible. So each rise of the step is not as high as usually they were made.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Okay. The original part of Tulip Hill was just that center section, and John Galloway was the one that put the hyphens on both sides of the main house. Those were done about 1820. Next. This is a tenant house at Ivy Neck. Two-family tenant house. Next one. Okay, got some really neat pictures of the Emma Giles coming into Galesville. Okay, here she comes in. Next one. You see this? Okay, I want you to notice something right here. This was, yes, black people were allowed to go on the Emma Giles, okay? But they had to go in this cabin right here. They were not allowed to be, this is an area of terrible segregation. If they wanted to go to Baltimore, the Emma Giles, went to Baltimore daily. And you see a gentleman hanging out a window right there. And then up here was was where the white passengers were on two levels right here. This is in Galesville. Next. There's some people waving. That's the Emma Giles pulling up to the pier in Galesville. She came to Ivy Neck every Wednesday, by the way. And I say every Wednesday, but when the river was iced in, she did not come. Paddle wheel boats cannot function in ice. There were several other boats that the Colchester line had that were propeller driven, but they weren't very efficient. But this is how you got some service here in the wintertime when there was ice, because the one boat could go through ice.
John, where did she come ashore in Ivy Neck?
Right at the wharf. You'll see pictures there. Ivy Neck had a wharf. Yes. Came every Wednesday because she was servicing the people, the tobacco growers in the head of Road River. It wasn't very convenient. There were 3 landings in Road River. Ivy Neck was one of them. Over by where the Smithsonian is now was the other one, and then in the Mayo Peninsula area. Okay, next. This is a painting of Samuel Galloway by Sir Joshua Reynolds.
Where is it? Where's the painting?
We believe it was sold to somebody in Massachusetts.
So it's not in the museum then?
No. Next painting. The next painting is of Samuel Galloway's wife, Anne. Anne Galloway was a Chew from down at Harrington. And this is how I'm related to the Chew family also. She never lived in Tulip Hill. She died before it was completed. It's really kind of sad, you know. But she died at what's called, at that time was called Cumberstone, which is the house over by the dump. There's a Sudley. You know where the Sudley house is? That was originally called Cumberstone. Cumberstone is now down in Cumberstone Road. The original Cumberstone, that house was built by a man named John Cumber. He called it Cumberstone. And it was owned by, in fact, Samuel Galloway was born in Cumberstone. Next.
Which one?
I'm sorry?
The old Cumberstone or the new one? Samuel Galloway
Was born in where Sudley is now, which was originally Cumberstone. That's a picture of Ivy Neck. Ivy Neck was built in 1787. Another one, Ivy Neck coming up here. Oh, I'm sorry. I stuck this in there. This is Muddy Creek Road. Everybody recognizes it, I'm sure. Okay? You can go 80 miles an hour down this thing. I have quite a few Muddy Creek Road pictures. Okay, next. Okay, somebody said, how big is tobacco? Well, let me tell you, this is some big tobacco. Look at this stuff. Here they are. This is, by the way, this isn't, these, I identified these. These are 1940 pictures. You'll see a lot of horses in here because you couldn't get gasoline. Very difficult to get gasoline. Okay, so they're chopping these plants off with a special shaped knife. And they're going to spear them on a wooden spear, maybe 5 or 6 plants, and then put them on a wagon and hang them in a tobacco barn and cure them. And then they're going to strip them and put them in hogsheads, and you're actually going to see how they made a hogshead. Next. There they are. Here's a load of tobacco sticks. The sticks were about this long. And you had a metal spear thing that fit on the top of it, and you speared the tobacco stalk on that until you could barely handle this thing, and hand it up to a guy. And then when they got to the tobacco barn, they had to pass them up layer after layer after layer, up maybe 30, 40 feet in the air, depending on the size of the tobacco barn, to get them up. And then they would hang the barn down like this until they filled it up. And our tobacco here was air-dried tobacco. It was called Maryland Type 32. Look at these beautiful horses. 1940. Next. Okay, you see that. Look at it. Look at it. You talk about leaves. Look at the size of this leaf.
Yeah.
We don't grow tobacco anymore. Betty and I did not take the tobacco buyout. We could start growing tobacco again if we wanted to. I think we would be crazy to do it, but we could do it. The people that took the tobacco buyout can never grow tobacco on that land again. The land is forever forbidden to grow tobacco.
When was the buyout? When?
I'm trying to remember, but maybe like 68, something like that, I think. Around 68 to 70, somewhere there. And it was based on how much you grew over the previous 5 years. We did not grow tobacco past, we stopped in 1966, I think was the last year we grew tobacco at Ivy Neck. Okay, next. Okay, here we are in the tobacco barn. Oh, there's a mountain of sticks over there, and here these guys are. They're putting together barrels from these staves right here. Now these are a little bit different than the kind of barrels you put whiskey in or something like that. They're very loose and they let air in through them. And they usually have a wooden strap around the top and one around the bottom. And then sometimes in the middle they would have wire or something. You'll see that in a minute. Next one. Okay, there's a homemade tobacco barrel or hogshead. They're getting these straps fixed up here. Next one.
Why were they called hogsheads?
Don't know. I've been asked that. Anybody know where the word hogshead came from? Eric is saying, do you? No. Hogshead. I do know that Ivy Neck had a huge smoked ham business. You're going to see pictures of that later on. And I know that they, in the new hogsheads, smoked hams to send to England, and we have a letter in the files from Sir Thomas Lipton telling about how wonderful the Ivy Neck smoked hams were. Next one. Okay, there's a hogshead of tobacco with tobacco in it that's probably been pressed. I don't think people at Ivy Neck ever did this, but anybody that ever had anything to do with tobacco, when they would take it to a place, they would often wonder, well, how many bricks is this going to have in it? The farmers apparently would put a rock in it or a brick or something like this, you know.
Paid by the pound.
The what?
You got paid by the pound.
You got paid by the pound. We never did that.
So were the hogshead all set to a particular size?
No, not at all.
So in other words, you could have a heavier hogshead and a lighter hogshead?
Yeah, if you had a bigger one, and you're going to see pictures of how this stuff got pressed there, you'll see a huge thing that pressed it in the hogshead. Next one. And there they are with it loaded up, horse pulling. Everybody's standing here so proud of themselves. Got this thing packed. Let's get out of here. Next one. Muddy Creek Road. Oh boy. Actually, the part of Muddy Creek Road, where you go, does everybody know where the Zhang's property, maybe about 3 miles north of here, you'll notice Muddy Creek Road dips down to a big long flat place and low ground and everything. That was absolutely impassable during heavy rains and things like that. It was a pretty bad road for a long time. Next one. Okay, this is one of the bigger bay boats, the Louise. I included that in here. She was quite a bit larger than the Emma Giles. She carried 3. I don't think that I've never seen any pictures of the Emma Giles with a deck like this above it, because the pilot house was right there. And then in about 1900, they put an addition on the pilot house of the Emma Giles. But this boat is a cargo deck right here, and this is where the Negro passengers would ride, and then they would put cattle and things in there through that door right there. And then this is a huge boat.
So that didn't come to Ivy Neck?
No, to my knowledge, she didn't. I would think this had been like a Tolchester boat or something, where she would carry 3,000 or 4,000 people across from Baltimore to Tolchester, the big amusement park across the bay. Probably make a couple of trips during the day. A really big boat. This is in Baltimore Harbor, by the way. Next one. That's a beautiful boat, though. Okay, this is an aerial photograph of Ivy Neck taken in 1937 by Dr. George Yeager, who was our family doctor. He later became the president of the University of Maryland Hospital System. He was a brigadier general in the Air Force during the Second World War as a medical doctor. That's the Ivy Neck house right there. Our house is right over about here. Ivy Neck was built in 1787 and burned in 1944. Not a happy story. Okay, somebody said, where's Camp Letts? Okay, you see all this? This is the Camp Letts shoreline. That's Oyster Shell Island or High Island. I used to own it, and it's washed away. Like all the islands on the Chesapeake Bay, they will one day wash away.
How did Ivy Neck burn?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
How did Ivy Neck burn?
How?
Yeah.
Chimney fire. The ashes from the embers from the chimney. You'll see pictures later of Ivy Neck. There was a huge tower on Ivy Neck, and what I was told, they didn't want to talk, the old people didn't want to talk about this very much, but in asking questions, I think I finally figured out what happened. Some ashes came up from a chimney fire, blew over to this tower, caught the tower on fire, and then it took hours to burn from the top down. They saved everything, just about everything on the first floor, and on the landing to the second floor, was a grandfather's clock made in Philadelphia, and we have that clock, and that's, as far as I know, the highest up thing that they managed to save.
I think there's still be maybe a few people here to remember it, the fire. I know.
Yeah, Mrs. Sarazinski, yeah. Okay, this is Camp Letts over here. That's changed a lot. I enlarged this, by the way. That's a whole bunch of little cabins along the shore. None of that stuff is there anymore. So that's Camp Letts, Cadle Creek, Mayo Peninsula right there, and Roberta lives right about there. Next.
Was Carr's Wharf the third place that the...
Yeah, if you...
Was Carr's Wharf the third place that the steamboat...
Yes, Carr's Wharf, they came to Carr's Wharf. Okay, this is the Ivy Neck House right here. Again, Dr. Yeager took this. Now we're looking towards the Mayo Peninsula right there. That creek right there. My sister lives right about in there. Our oyster bar, we have a 4-acre oyster bar right about in here. This is some of the Ivy Neck fields right here. Hasn't changed very much, really. Got a lot of cattle on it now. A lot of cattle weren't there before. Some cattle, not very many. My great aunt had a turkey business in this field right here. Right there. And our house is right over in there. Next one. Hope I'm not boring you with these pictures that if I didn't produce them or else. Right, Dorothy? Next one.
Did she have wild turkeys or tame?
Oh, these are tame turkeys. Yeah. Okay, there's another view of Ivy Neck. The entrance to Ivy Neck was around on the other side of the house. This is looking north.
Was Ivy Neck a wooden building?
No, brick. Oh, the main part of the house that was built by James Cheston and his wife was 36 by 36 feet, and then later Dr. Casper Morris, who you're going to learn a lot about in a little while, added a library on this end, an addition on this end, and you'll see pictures of a smokehouse down on this end. All burned. Next. Okay. That's a magnificent picture in the snow of Ivy Neck. There's the tower right there, and there was down over the hill here, there was an artesian well. It was 480 feet deep, and there was a hydraulic ram that pumped water up the hill to a Cypress water tank in the top of this tower. And I believe that's where the fire started, on that tower right there.
How did they drill an artesian well that deep when the house was built? Or was it not?
It's still there. The pipe coming up, and I actually salvaged the hydraulic ram. It's in our basement with all the other thousands of things that I've filled up our basement with. And it's 480 feet deep, and it's just maybe a couple feet above sea level, and it pumped a lot of water. In fact, water still runs out of that pipe.
Well, how did they drill it that deep?
I think they did I don't know much about drilling wells, but I suspect they had a hammer kind of thing went up and down like that. Eric, do you know how they did it? How they drilled a big well? It's a 2-inch well, by the way, 2-inch brass pipe.
I'm thinking that house originally had shallow bricked up wells, 35, 40 feet, like Tulip Hill. But that's a higher elevation. That technology, the guy had iron thread pipe in the ground. So those artesian wells came along in 1860.
They pumped it a long way, but you could pump like 10 gallons to get a pint. And that's about the way it ran. Okay, next one.
I think that...
Oh, no, don't change that one yet. Okay, there's the smokehouse right there at the very end of the house, and it's connected by a little, like, some wooden frame building here between them. You'll see pictures later. Okay.
Was the tower built as original part of the house?
I'm sorry?
Was the tower part of the original house?
No, Dr. Casper Morris added that to the house. And he was the one that had that well drilled, and the water tank put up there. Water's a real problem around here in colonial times. Oh, I know you wouldn't be able to guess this. Muddy Creek Road. Actually, that looks like an improved one because I see gravel on it, of all things. All right, next.
Do you have another program?
Is that it?
Yeah.
Can I go home?